Hi there, I want to welcome you to this latest episode from the Plumline Studios. My name is Lance Ford, and I welcome you into this conversation today that's a tough one. It's one that I know when I first started in ministry as a wide-eyed 19-year-old, I would have never dreamed that these issues would be in the church. Even as an early disciple, looking at what Jesus had to say, looking at the tone, looking at the verbiage of the New Testament writers, I would have never dreamed that we would have leaders, we would have pastors, shepherds that would treat people in a bullying way. But unfortunately, that very much is the case. Jesus said the Gentiles dominate or they lord over one another. It'll not be this way among you. Unfortunately, it's become very much that way among us today, and that's what we're going to look at today. You know, we've all experienced bullies growing up, probably on the schoolyard or in the classroom or in the neighborhood. There's always a bully around. They always have been. David dealt with it. Moses dealt with it with Pharaoh. People that have one-upmanship over you. They have the power over you, or they feel like they're better than you, or that they have the power over you. Bullies seem to be everywhere. And the thing about it is bullying is adolescent behavior. Regardless of the age of the bully, regardless of the experience of the bully, it really is childlike behavior. It's evidence of immaturity. Oftentimes, it's evidence of insecurity. Either way, it's a sign of poor character. And unfortunately, it's a sign of the lack of the fruit of the Spirit, which really is the litmus test just for being a Christian, just for being a follower of Jesus, much less being a leader in the church. Unfortunately, we've let the gifts of the Spirit fly and move and go forward without filtering them through the fruit of the Spirit. And you probably hope that once you became an adult, that bullies would be a thing of the past, but the sad reality and the shock to all of us was that when we became adults, bullies still existed, and sometimes they had more power than ever over us. Although that childhood fear of getting clobbered on the playground is probably past us, many cultures of leadership today still have this overriding, overarching culture of fear and intimidation of getting whacked in one way or the other. And sadly, it's prevalent in churches today. It's a leadership system or culture that's the problem. Actually, the system is the bully, and the system empowers the bully. And the secret behind it is that a lot of these leaders, a lot of these bully leaders, or a lot of these bully pastors hide behind a type of diplomatic immunity. I call it leadership immunity. People look at them and say, yeah, but the church is growing, the church is fruitful, he's a great pastor, he's a great teacher, etc. But the thing is the day-to-day church member has no idea what that leader is and what they're like behind the scenes, behind the Greek curtain. It's all smiles on the platform, it's all smiles in public, it's all smiles on Sunday morning. But what a lot of church members have no clue is behind the scenes, staff members are constantly being intimidated. They're constantly facing threats. They're constantly facing just this aura of fear. And it's really hard for the everyday church member to even get their head around the fact that this is the way it is. It's a classic culture of gaslighting. So how do you recognize that these type of pastors, that these type of leaders are really out of order? And what do you do about it once you realize it? It really is the elephant in the room of church leadership today. It's right there. It's right over there. Everyone really knows it, but no one's been able to pinpoint it. No one's been able to put theology to it. There's a fear of, if you ask others on the team, hey, do you see what I see? That alone is considered mutiny, that's off limits. So it really is this system that protects the bully from being exposed, from being called out, and having to face the consequences of not acting like Jesus, not obeying Jesus, and not following through on what the rest of the New Testament teaches us about what a leader should look like. Many years before I ever worked towards my seminary degree, I was a Bible college student. And early on in my tenure in Bible college, a pastor of a small little country church approached me and offered me an opportunity to be their first youth pastor. Now, I had no idea that man, and actually that man and his wife would end up being my lifelong mentors, would be two of the most important people ever in my life to this very day, and that was 40 something years ago. This was my first introduction to working with a pastor, and it really could not have been a better experience. It was a phenomenal experience because Sam and Marge were the epitome of shepherds. Loving, wise, consistent, Jesus-y. I don't know any other way to put it. That was the good news. But the bad news was it kind of ruined me. I thought, well, that's the way it is. That's the way all pastors are. And so, man, I can't wait to get going on my, quote, ministry career. Well, I was really in for a surprise. I was really in for a wake up. Because when I graduated Bible college and my wife and I were starting our life together, that little church, they just couldn't afford me. It was not going to be sustainable for me to be able to make a living. And at that point, I had no mindset of bivocational ministry, co-vocational ministry. No, man, I was in full-time ministry. So I was ready to go for it. And so we left that place. We went on staff at a larger church out in West Texas. And man, let me tell you, that was the wake-up call. This pastor really treats everybody very different from what I've experienced for the last 3 years with Sam and Marge. Less than 2 weeks into it, I found myself literally being physically assaulted. Grabbed by my collar and pushed up against a wall, physically assaulted because I had not done something that the pastor, in fact, had never asked me to do. Over the next few months, this type of thing continued until I asked for an appointment with the pastor. We sat down and I confronted him in a very submitted way, in a very respectful way. My goodness, I was only 21 years old. And I remember the pastor leaning across his desk with kind of a wiry type of grin. And through gritted teeth, he said, "You young Bible school guys, you always come in here and you have no clue how this works. What you have to understand is the church is a business." That was the first time I ever heard that phrase. There is no way I could count how many times I've heard it since then. Pastor saying the church is a business. And that's the thing. They have learned from the world. They've learned from the Gentiles, from what the Old Testament prophets would have called Babylon or Egypt, how to dominate others and how to, quote, manage others. These were the very things, again, that Jesus said, "It will not be this way among you." But it's become pretty prevalent in the prevailing leadership cultures in our churches today. Now, over the years, through other experiences, through other stops in ministry, through other tenures in ministry, I found out that West Texas pastor was not alone, but that there were a lot of them just like him. Some of them even worse. And over the years, as I've been behind the scenes and seen how leadership is cultivated and played out and carried out in so many leadership cultures, I've thought a lot on it. I've written a lot on it on the last 15 years. And so I want to give you a few points to look at. I want to give you a few things to keep your eye out to be able to recognize when you are in the system of a bully pastor or a bully culture leadership system in a church or faith-based organization? First off, there is just this overarching patriarchal culture. There's considered only to be one or two or a very few adults in the room. Everybody else is treated like adolescents. Everybody else is told when to do what, how to do it, where to do it, if they can do it, if they can't do it, are they allowed? It really is a patriarchal culture. People are asked questions in condescending tones. They're told what to do. They're not asked what to do. Only a few people have certain perks and privileges. Those are people usually in a level called executive. Once again, a term that comes straight out of the world, a term that elevates and sets apart and delineates people at the top and people at the bottom. Things that Jesus totally obliterated with his kingdom parables, with his kingdom language of equality. Not necessarily a quality of skill or a quality of power, but a quality of status. This was the hallmark of how his kingdom would operate. Another thing in a bully culture is that there's no boundaries. Remember when maybe your mom or your dad would not knock on your bedroom door? They just pop right in, they just open the door. That's part of this tag on to a patriarchal culture. And that's the way it is with so many bully leaders. They feel like you're there to be interrupted at their will. And so they'll call you at all hours. They will call you even on your days off. There will be times that they'll expect you and demand you to do things that are outside of your schedule, and you feel like you have no recourse, that you have no rights, that you have no personhood or agency within it. No boundaries. And the thing is that Jesus taught a servanthood culture. He said the greatest will be the servant. So a non-bully leader would be a leader that actually would be coming to you and saying, hey, what do you need? How can I help you? Are you missing any resources? Do you need any help? Do you need any assets I can help you with? That's what a servant does. It's not what a bully does. And then there's just this authoritarian leadership style, this overall culture that just is heavy-handed. And this is what authoritarian leadership does. It seeks power over others. It constantly maintains control, command and control over others. An authoritarian leader dominates decision-making and suppresses differing opinions until finally, most people on a staff under this type of leadership just start holding their opinions to themselves. They just go with the flow. But this all contradicts the things that Jesus sternly told his disciples. Luke 22:25-27. And he said to them, the kings of the Gentiles exercise lordship over them, and those in authority over them are called benefactors. But not so with you. Rather, let the greatest among you become as the youngest, and the leader as one who serves. For who is the greater, one who reclines at the table or one who serves? Is it not the one who reclines at table? But I am among you as the one who serves. Jesus demonstrated and came as the one who serves, not the one that was served, not the one that got all the perks and the privileges, but the one that treated the other, that treated the one he was serving as the one that deserved perks and privileges. Again, Matthew 20:25-28. But Jesus called them to him and said, you know that the rulers of the Gentiles lord over them, and their great ones exercise authority over them. It shall not be so among you, but whoever would be a great among you must be your servant, and whoever would be first among you must be your slave, even as the Son of Man came not to be served, but to serve and give his life as a ransom for many. Then there is the fear factor. It's a culture of intimidation and fear. Bully pastors often use and maintain intimidation and just an aura of fear and control. It creates an atmosphere where people are afraid to speak up, to challenge. In fact, any questioning of a decision or a thought is considered to be a challenge. That's a bully atmosphere. Intimidation tactics could include body language, looks, stare downs, direct threats, or just creating a culture of fear where staff members just constantly feel on edge that they might make a mistake, that they might mess up. This spirit is contrary to the spirit of love, to the spirit of gentleness, to the spirit of meekness, to the spirit of kindness. 2 Timothy 1:7 reminds us, for the spirit God gave us does not make us timid, but gives us power, love, and self-discipline. A leader that's an equiper, according to Ephesians 4, is one that gives a spirit of power, that gives a spirit of love, that helps to build up a sound mind in those that he or she's leading. And this is something the worst of bully pastors do. It's public humiliation. And it's instilled not only to suppress the spirit of the individual, but also to be a warning to the rest of the staff of what will happen if you mess up, if you question. This is just to constantly keep you in line. And this approach, this style, this MO of leadership is directly opposed to what Paul said in Ephesians. Ephesians 4:29, do not let any unwholesome talk come out of your mouths, but only what is helpful for building others up according to their needs, that it may benefit those who listen. That's a leadership text. Why is it not a leadership text? Why does that not apply to leadership? Why would a pastor get immunity from a verse like that? Always in these cultures, there is a lack of accountability. Accountability is a one-way street. So accountability gets more narrow as it goes up the leadership ladder. And so the executives, whether it be the senior pastor, and the executive pastor, they're accountable to either one another or to no one. And so it's a very narrow corner of accountability there. Now, in the largest churches, there's become in vogue this good old boy system where pastors of large churches will, quote, be on each other's board of accountability. So it's the good old boys holding each other accountable. How stupid do they think we are? And then there's the control of information. These cultures always control information. Everyone's on a need to know basis. And so once again, the higher you get up the pyramid, the more narrow is the output of information, even to the point where unashamedly, for the last several decades, churches have introduced NDAs, non-disclosure agreements, something straight out of Babylon, something straight out of the Gentiles' leadership handbook. You suppress people, you suppress their voices. People that are already strapped, when you finally fire them, when you finally let them go, they have to sign an agreement to get severance. You can't go out and tell the stories. You can't go out and tell what's happened behind the scenes. Sign this right here or you won't get your money. It's hush money. It's a bribe. And then there's just this overall self-seeking. Bully pastors, it's all about them. This is where the narcissism comes out in them. They focus on their own agenda, on their own angles, on their own status. They wake up in the morning, how can the staff serve me? They don't wake up thinking, how can I serve them? And here's another one of those verses that should be on the bathroom mirror of every leader. Philippians 2:3-4. Let nothing be done through selfish ambition or conceit, but in lowliness of mind, let each esteem others better than himself. Let each of you look not only for his own interest, but also for the interests of others. And then there's just this demanding perfection aspect of bully cultures. You better not mess up. You better not drop the ball. We expect excellence here. We expect perfection here. Okay, so if you find yourself in one of these cultures, what do? You may be a staff member, you may be an associate pastor, you may be a youth pastor, you may be a volunteer worker. and you see these types of things, what are you supposed to do? Let's talk a little bit about that. First thing is you have to decide, am I going to take it? Am I going to put up with this? Am I just going to put my head down? Am I going to weather it, the storm? Or what am I going to do about it? Am I going to stay silent just because everyone else is staying silent? Or will I speak up? Will I go to someone that can either do something about it or recognize what's going on? The fact is, you may find yourself looking for other employment, and that's the decision you have to make before you go into confronting this, if that's what you decide to do. But the fact of the matter is, and what we have to be honest with ourselves about, is to remain silent is actually to become an accomplice in the system. We need to think about that, and we need to confront ourselves with that truth. And then we need to really go into prayer about this thing. We really need to seek the Lord's counsel. We need to seek the Holy Spirit to fill us up and to give us the spirit of wisdom and understanding, the spirit of counsel, and the spirit of might. James promises us that God will give us wisdom. James 1:5, if any of you lacks wisdom, you should ask God, who gives generously to all without finding fault, and it will be given to you. So you need to take time to meditate on the scriptures, to seek God's guidance, and to seek the mind of Christ throughout this journey. Next, you need to document the behavior. Now, this doesn't mean you're some type of a PI, or you're an investigative reporter, or you're just trying to find dirt on somebody. No, you just start keeping a journal and keeping a log of facts. Because the first thing that happens when you confront people like this is they start saying, give me an example. And if you give nebulous answers to that, if you just say, oh, well, you're just this way, or it just always seems yada, 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 your voice is going to fall flat. You have to be able to substantiate with facts and times and dates and strong and concise answers and examples of what you're talking about. Be sure that your records are factual and that they're free from emotional bias. Next, you need to seek counsel. Seek advice from a trusted mentor or an advisor that's outside the immediate church context. And I would really suggest that you seek out at least 2 to 3. Proverbs 11:14 says, in the multitude of counselors, there's safety. And so a fresh perspective can really provide some valuable insights and strategies as you move forward. Okay, next comes confronting. First of all, you need to have a demeanor of respect, and you want to calm yourself in that demeanor. You want to approach this leader in respect, because really your hope is that this person will repent. And it may not seem like that they will, but that's our hope. Our hope is that this pastor that you joined up with in the first place because you believed in what was going on in that mission, in that church, you hope that they will repent, that they will become the leader and the person that you thought you were joining along with in the first place. So you want to approach this conversation with humility and with love, and not in the tone of a personal attack. But you want to be firm, and you want to be clear, and you want to let this leader know that the behavior is contrary to Scripture. It's contrary to the character of Jesus. And you want to let this pastor know, hey, we're going to look at the Bible on this. And you want to come prepared with the biblical reasons for your concerns. So you're not coming just out of feeling. You're not coming because you can't, quote, take it. No, you're coming from the mind of Christ. Now, you got to be prepared for resistance, but remain steadfast in your convictions on this. Let them know that although this behavior is very common in so many prevailing leadership cultures, that doesn't make it right, and that doesn't make it acceptable for the culture that you all are in right now. Now, what do you do if you're rebuffed? Because chances are you will be. Hopefully not, but chances are you will be. This is where we involve others. And this really is where we're moving into the proper application along the line of Matthew 18. And Matthew 18 in so many ways is bandied about. it's misused, but we really are moving along in a Matthew 18 structure right here, in a Matthew 18 process. And so this is where, if you are rebuffed, you involve others. So let's look at Matthew 18, verse 16. But if they will not listen, take one or two others along, so that every matter may be established by the testimony of two or three witnesses. So we want to ensure that these individuals are respected, that they're impartial. And the problem may be that other staff members are afraid to speak up. They've not come to the point where you're at, and they may be afraid of being labeled as a traitor. They may just want to put their head down and say, don't involve me in this. I see nothing. And that's another risk that you're going to have to be prepared for. So as we move along the next phase, this is where we need to involve people in overseership, whether it be elders or other staff leaders that may be, quote, above you on the structure. You go to them, you share with them the documentation, you let them know, you're demonstrating to them that you have not just jumped into this out of emotion, but you have prayerfully considered it. You've done your due diligence theologically. You've considered it. You've looked hard at it. And here's where you're at, and you are following along the Matthew 18 process. And I would really advise that you document this through an email, or if you have a meeting with an elder or an overseer, that you immediately return from that meeting, you document it, you send an email to that person affirming the meeting that you just had and the key points in that meeting. This gives you dated documentation. And that's important so that you can't be labeled as a traitor or doing things behind the scenes or in the dark. And it's important that you get out front of that type of stuff, because you'll be accused of being a traitor. You'll be accused of being scandalous. You'll be accused of, quote, sowing seeds of discord among the brethren. Now, if nothing changes, if the behavior keeps going on, or it maybe even escalates, or maybe even it gets more pointed to you because you've entered into this process, let's look at this verse. 1 Timothy 5:19 through 20. Do not entertain an accusation against an elder unless it's brought by two or three witnesses. But those elders who are sinning, you are to reprove before everyone, so that the others may take warning. This is where you go to a broader body. And it may be the entire staff. It may be in a town hall meeting. It may be in a meeting that you call for the elders and other staff members who have joined in to witness with you and the pastor, to share this information, to share the process that you've gone through, the conversations that you've had with the pastor when you confronted him or her. You're carrying out this text. But be sure and make your motives clear, that you're coming in love, that you really do want this pastor to be restored. You really want to see him or her lead with the capacity that they have, that you want to be a team. But the way it is and the way it has been in that leadership culture is a non-starter for you. Make it clear that you're not doing this out of animosity or a personal vendetta against the leader, but you love the church, you love the mission, and you want to see it move forward. The aim really is to correct the behavior and to instill godly leadership. And this is where Galatians 6:1 through 2 comes into play. Brothers and sisters, if someone is caught in a sin, you who live by the Spirit should restore that person gently. But watch yourselves, or you also may be tempted. Carry each other's burdens, and in this way you will fulfill the law of Christ. Okay, so now, depending on the outcome of the process at this point, if it's been a good one, fantastic. Move forward. Otherwise, you have to know when to step away. And you just have to trust that God's going to lead you to a healthier environment as you move forward in your ministry and calling. Now, hopefully what we've looked at in this episode, you will find helpful. And myself and my colleagues, this is what we do. We do coaching, we do consulting, we do courses to help staff members, to help leaders, to help pastors, to help church planters. If you're interested in reaching out to us for more help and more formalized leadership in that, just look at the link below. And please be sure to hit that subscribe button, ring that bell so that you don't miss newer episodes. Thank you for being with me on this one.